Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow supports a 30-day ceasefire with Ukraine, but that there are key details that need to be discussed before he agrees to a deal. It's the first time the Russian leader has responded to the US proposed temporary peace agreement. US President Donald Trump says President Putin's response is very promising and that he's willing to talk to the Russian leader to secure a deal. Michelle Rimmer reports.
Well, we've been waiting for a response from Russia since Ukraine said that it's ready to accept the 30-day ceasefire proposed by the US earlier this week. We've now heard from Russian President Vladimir Putin, and his message was mixed. On the one hand, he said that he's for a peace agreement and that he could agree to this ceasefire in principle. However, he said there are a number of sticking points that need to be discussed. Among the issues that he said need to be ironed out is what would happen to Ukrainian troops that are currently fighting in Russia's Kursk region. Vladimir Putin says that in his view, they either need to surrender or die and shouldn't be given the opportunity to return to Ukrainian soil. He also said that any sort of ceasefire would need to lead to a lasting peace between Russia and Ukraine. This couldn't just be a temporary pause in fighting. He also said that any sort of agreement would need to address the initial causes of the conflict, which Russia has always said was Western aggression. Now, this is something that the West has denied in the 3 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion. These are just a couple of the things that the Russian president put forward in what was an extended press conference. Here's a little bit more of what he had to say.
Who will give orders to cease hostilities? And what will be the price of such orders? Who will figure out who, in a 2,000-kilometre-long battlefield, had broken a ceasefire? And then who will blame whom in violation of this agreement? These are many of the questions that need to be analysed carefully by both sides. That's why the idea itself is right, and we absolutely support it. But there are questions we should discuss.
So where to from here? Well, the Russian president said that he'd be willing to have a phone conversation with US President Donald Trump to discuss some of these concerns. Donald Trump has already responded and said that he's willing to speak to the Russian leader if it means that they'll get towards a peace agreement. He also said that Putin's words were quite promising, that he hopes Russia does the right thing. We've also heard from Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy, who said that Russia doesn't want to end this conflict, that it wants to continue fighting, and that it's putting forward these conditions as a way of either delaying a ceasefire or preventing one from happening at all. He also accused Vladimir Putin of being afraid of the US and afraid of telling Donald Trump that he doesn't want to finish this conflict, that he doesn't want to stop fighting, and that, in the words of the Ukrainian president, he wants to continue to kill Ukrainians. So it's unclear where to next. However, there is potential for a phone conversation, at least, between the US President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in the coming days.
Ukrainians are anxiously waiting to see if a US-backed ceasefire will be accepted by Russia. The president of the Ukrainian World Congress, Paul Grod, says the war-torn nation desperately needs a resolution.
It's important to understand that the Ukrainian people want peace more than anything because they were the ones who were invaded. They didn't start the war. Actually 11 years ago, Russia first invaded Ukraine, and then 3 years ago started the full-scale invasion and has been consistently bombing Ukrainian cities. Just in the last 48 hours, they had over 260 drone attacks on Ukraine. In the last 24 hours, 120 hitting civilian targets, killing people. And so the Ukrainians live through this on a daily basis. So of course they want peace. But they also don't want peace at any cost. They want a just and lasting peace because they've been here before. Russia guaranteed Ukraine's security still when Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenals, as did the United States. Yet today they are invading the country. And we can't let a large power like Russia exert its sphere of influence, because that's basically what Putin wants.
US President Donald Trump has threatened to slap a 200% tariff on European wine and spirits imports into the US in a further escalation of his trade war with traditional allies. North America correspondent Carrington Clarke reports from Washington, D.C.
All signs are pointing to a deepening of the trade war that is currently roiling markets around the world. Donald Trump out on social media threatening to hit the European Union with a 200% tariff on champagnes, wines, and other alcohol products from the European Union imported into the United States. He says that's an answer to the European Union's threat to hit American whiskey, that is bourbon, being imported into the European Union with a 50% tariff. Now, the European Union says their tariffs are simply a response to Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs on the import of aluminium and steel into the United States, which hits all countries, no exemptions, including Australia. Now, the European Union says that its tariffs were finely calibrated to be proportionate to the economic impact that Donald Trump's tariffs would have on the European Union. But Donald Trump doesn't seem to be having a bar of that. He says any country that tries to hit America with tariffs will in turn face punishment.
You are not going to change your mind?
No, look, we've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore. No, I'm not going to bend at all. Aluminum or steel or cars, we're not going to bend. We've been ripped off as a country for many, many years. We've been subjected to costs that we shouldn't be subjected to.
It was another bad day here in the United States on markets. It does appear that investors are increasingly concerned that Donald Trump's moves on tariffs aren't just some sort of bluster or attempt to gain leverage to get a political outcome. He seems to genuinely want to use tariffs to completely reshape the way the American economy works. Let's remember what tariffs are. They are a tax on imports into a country. They force up the cost for consumers who buy those products, which effectively pushes up inflation. If we get inflation back above the target of what central banks want, we could in turn see interest rates rising, and there is a real risk of America being plunged into recession. We've seen many economists come out with changed forecasts because of the impact that tariffs are likely to have. It's unclear, though, that Donald Trump will continue down this path if we continue to see investors selling off stocks in the way that they currently are. In his first term in office, Donald Trump used the stock market as a barometer of his success. He liked it when it went up, he didn't like it when it went down, and he seemed willing to be flexible about his policies in order to get some upward momentum on the markets. This time around, he seems less concerned, and he says, yes, there might be some disturbance in the short term as these tariffs start to work, but in the long term, this is about bringing back American manufacturing, bringing back American jobs. But there is still a long way for this to play out. Some countries like the European Union, like those in the European Union, but also Canada, have decided to take a more adversarial approach to Donald Trump slapping the United States with tariffs. Other countries like Australia and the United Kingdom at this point seem unwilling to go down that path. But if we start to see American consumers paying more for their products, will Donald Trump blink?
Carrington Clarke reporting there. Back home, the Albanese government is using its critical minerals deposits as a bargaining chip with the United States amid the escalating global trade tensions. Meanwhile, a former Labor leader has weighed in, suggesting the Albanese government should push back harder against Donald Trump. Isabel Rowe is across it all for us from Parliament House in Canberra this morning. Good morning, Isabel. So what's the government saying about how it's going to leverage the US?
Well, Australia has a uniquely large amount of critical minerals which can be used to build military equipment, for example, and it wants to use our mineral stocks as some sort of bargaining chip if the US continues to place tariffs on Australia. At the moment, the government is trying to avoid a second round of tariffs that could be coming next month. They are tariffs on industries such as beef, potentially pharmaceuticals, and both of those would have a much larger economic impact on Australia than the tariffs that we've seen placed on steel and aluminium this week. Now, the government has already ruled out reciprocal tariffs, but it is looking for some sort of bargaining chip with the US. The Resources Minister, Catherine King, has told the ABC that we would very much like to have a partnership with the US, but she says if they don't want to do that, that's up to them, and Australia will look elsewhere for some other trading partners. Already Australia has been trying to diversify who it trades critical minerals with and exports critical minerals to, for example, Europe and Asia, but it would like the US government to know that those other options are there should Donald Trump continue to put pressure on Australia's economy. We've also heard this morning now from the Labor leader, former Labor leader Bill Shorten. He left politics not so long ago, but he has been on Channel 7 saying he thinks that Australia should be pushing back against the Trump administration even harder.
Well, at the end of the day, if they keep putting tariffs on all of our goods, then we've got to reciprocate dollar for dollar, tariff for tariff. At the moment, aluminium and steel, maybe we can withstand those tariffs they put on by Buy Australian. But at a certain point, the people you're negotiating with have got to think you've got an alternative. They've got to think that you mean business.
The former Labor leader, Bill Shorten there. We love a former Labor leader or leader weighing in. There's been a few of those this week. Bill Shorten is now the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Canberra, so he's able to make those opinions known. The Prime Minister's office has pointed us to their previous statements that they will not be putting reciprocal tariffs on Donald Trump's tariffs.
Isabel Rowe in Canberra there, thank you.